breaking battles in the early 2000s, and seeing b-boys fly and do things that I never could have imagined, and seeing that sense of community and family it opened my eyes to the hip hop culture. So that was one of my first introductions. When I say to hip hop, it wasn't necessarily music that resonated with me. I loved the music, but it was more of being engaged in the culture.
Dope. For me, I remember vividly. I'm an 80s baby too, right? So, and my elementary school, where I went from like kindergarten to the 6th grade, was primarily like white people. So it was a lot of like Spice Girls or like whatever was popping back then, which I didn't really get into, but I was like heavy on the R&B. Like I like TLC, and I remember Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style came out when I was in like the maybe 2nd or 3rd grade. And I talked my mom into buying it for me. My mom actually took me to the music store, and the parenting conversation is for another day. She let me, she bought it for me, and I just fell in love with like the storytelling. You know what I mean? It was just like you listen to a track and it's like a movie, like it's like a word movie, and I just, you know, I fell in love with like the idea of someone being able to like pen something down and then someone else be able to listen to it, and then you could picture it in your head. And that was the first album. That was the first album for me.
I absolutely, yes, we definitely have to find a moment to just get into the relationship of you and your mom and Snoop, and like in that album. Like that's so intriguing. I think there's a lot there that like almost plants the seeds. So a shout out one time to the 80s baby. If you're an 80s baby, if you know what that is, drop it in the chat. We'll take some 80s adjacent babies too. So if you're a early 90s, let's just be clear, late 90s was a different type of party, but we still here for it. So given how you all met through dance, through the music, and how you were drawn to it as young people, yes, you can. Somebody is asking, can they be grandfathered in if they were born in 1990? Yes.
Well, yeah.
We'll take you.
Yeah.
You were in utero in 89, probably. So I don't know. We'll just go with it. But given that you all met and had these like experiences with hip hop as young folks, I'm wondering if you can think back, if you go back, rewind the tape of your lives to your elementary to high school years, was your love and the identity that you were kind of creating or affirming through hip hop, was there a space for that in your schooling where that was embraced, welcomed? Was there any curiosity? I'm seeing some initial.
So I wasn't the best behaved or well-behaved child in junior high and the beginning of high school. I know it's hard to believe. And I think I identified a lot through music. So it was when The Chronic was coming out. My mom speaking of moms buying new CDs, she got me the Master P CD. So my mom was about it. She would always support me. But when I went to school and would talk about the music, it was very much shunned. I was seen as a rebel. And when I was treated like a rebel, I acted like a rebel. And it wasn't until I think midway through high school where people acknowledged that there is a brain in here behind the behaviors. So I think for a long time, I had to wrestle with that. Identifying, dressing, I did the chola. I was always in what people would consider hip hop gear back then, but I was viewed as a delinquent. So I guess the early years with hip hop were seen as it's an act of defiance and was treated as a delinquent because I engaged in it. And then that's just, high school and junior high.
Yeah, like my experience kind of echoes what Tasha's talking about. Sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name either. Is it Tasha or Tasha?
Tasha's fine.
Okay, Tasha. Yeah, my experience, it mirrors that. And this is actually, you know, I've done a lot of research and work on it as part of my thesis and my TED talk on this, the Fresh Prince syndrome. And I feel like I remember being in grade 9 or like my freshman or sophomore year, getting suspended for like wearing a hat in school. Like I wore a hat, the teacher told me to take it off. And we looped around, we spun the block and met up each other. And then I had my hat back on, obviously. I got sent to the office and got suspended under the code of opposition to authority, simply for wearing a hat, like missing 2 days of school back in like the early 2000s, I guess, or very late 90s. And I think as I look back on my experience, there was no room for articulations of hip hop inside school buildings, inside the classrooms. In fact, it was the opposite. It was like anything hip hop about you was not only like policed and surveilled, but like written into the actual policies of the school. Like, you know, like no headgear, like you can't wear your pants sagging, you can't wear certain shirts with certain, you know, paraphernalia or whatever. Basically, whatever we aspire to, like as you know, I'll speak for like young Black males, that was shunned inside the school. So, and I think, as for me as well, I wasn't the most like sit at the front of the, I definitely wasn't the sit at the front of the class, like put my hand up, participate type of kid. But it was because of the school already kind of denied a part of my identity. Like I felt like my hip hop being was not, it didn't belong in the school. So counterintuitively, or maybe passively or subconsciously, we also like rejected the school as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's intriguing, like just hearing like what came up for both of you all, and something I wrote down was like you were viewed as delinquent, viewed as defiant, opposition to authority, without anybody really engaging like who you are and how you all could identify what's informed who you are up until that point. But there's immediately, like you said, policing and policying of identities. Y'all can quote me on that one too, no. But that's the thing, like we'll write a policy to cancel out people's identities, and it might just make them feel like a human. And to think about the ways that you all are attracted to hip hop, but that was not embraced. There was no room carved out for that. Is telling. And so I wonder then, like in y'all's present work, and this is the time where like y'all can also expand and expound on how you give the bio of yourself and your work. If you think about what drew you to hip hop, recall your experiences as a student. Can y'all open up and share a bit more for folks about your current teaching or educational practices, and what from those early experiences how did you go back to those, or how did you pull on those to inform where you are today, if you have? So just opening up to folks a bit more about where your present practice is and how those memories, those experiences have informed where you are right now.
Yeah, so for me, you know, when I went to, you know, faculty of education, when I decided to get into education, a lot of the work that we engaged in was like reflecting on your experience as a student. And for me, I had a lot of like not positive experiences inside the classroom. And a lot of my friends, my own brother didn't end up graduating from high school. He eventually got his GED, but there's something about school that like impeded a lot of Black males in my opinion. And it's part of it was, like I said, denying that hip hop identity. So for me, I've been in the trenches. I've been teaching for about 9 years now in public schools in Toronto. And it was my intention as a teacher to shatter some of the stereotypes that people have around not only hip hop, but Blackness. And I remember when I first started teaching, you know, I didn't even want to wear my earrings into school, and like I wanted to cover up my tattoos. And you know, you go to the store before like I got my first job, and it was like, okay, what should I guess I need to look like a teacher. Like, what does a teacher look like? So should I go to like Tommy Hilfiger and buy like a whole bunch of khakis and like plaid shirts, even though I don't wear khakis? But it was a it was an evolutionary process for myself as well as a teacher, because I had to unlearn and undo some of that historical and hierarchical racism that exists within schooling, that exists within education. And I got to the point where, you know, slowly, like, the shirts would come untucked, the earrings would stay in, the tattoos started to extend past the elbow into the, you know, down on the forearms, because not only is teaching from anti-Black racism lens tied to hip hop curriculum and hip hop education, but there's also a part of representation that I think is important as well. And it's one thing to infuse like hip hop into the curriculum, but it's another to almost like symbolically live it. So that's kind of where I am right now in my journey as an educator, is keeping the Saturday Matthew Morris on throughout the work week from Monday to Friday. So I'm still like the Mr. Morris that is Matthew Morris on Saturday, so to speak.
So what happens when your students run into you on Saturday? Just kidding. Just kidding.
That's why I don't teach under 18.
Right.
That actually made me think of some things. I wrote down some notes thinking about my history with hip hop and academia. So my introduction to it is a little unconventional, I think, for most academics. As an undergrad, I was a promoter so, you know, you always have to have your side hustles. Just put that out there. One of my side hustles as an undergrad was to promote for underground hip hop shows and reggae shows. And so I also got employed to work for the teachers union, the faculty union. And they were like, we need to register like thousands of people to vote. We need to turn them out to some rallies, right? I was like, okay, I'll throw a show. Because that's what I was familiar with was people come when you have artists and food, especially as undergrads. So I was like, let's get some pizza and some good music. I'll walk around. So that was kind of my first, without knowing it, introduction of how hip hop can also be used as a source of activism, or how they can be combined. Through the first jam on my campus, it was a women in hip hop event. And that, again, not consciously really thinking about how women were represented in the culture, but I just wanted to showcase that. Went into my master's program. I got admitted for a master's degree, a master's program in sociology, with the intent to study the hip hop culture. Once I was admitted, they're like, nah, maybe you shouldn't do that. So this is, you know, the mid 2005, and talked me out of studying the culture. I remember I gave all my books to another student, and that was one of my first blows, I think, in academia. People saying it's not relevant, it's not going to help you in your career. And I listened to them. Fast forward, and again, still continuing to study the culture. I was fascinated with the history of breaking, and I continued to go out to New York every 3 or 4 months and just talk to the pioneers. So when I got into my, and for those that are in graduate school or going for a doctoral program, there's an interview before you're admitted. And they asked me, what books are you reading? And the only books that I was reading at the time, I was a union negotiator. So I was like, I want to read something fun, was on hip hop. And so he said, oh, tell me about these books. And I remember leaving the meeting, the interview, just being so scared, because I said, all I did was talk about hip hop. And this professor was like, that's the first time anyone's ever brought up hip hop in an interview. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Got admitted. And when I was asked to work with foster youth from a ministry outreach program, I realized that the foster youth were just bored. They didn't want to be in workshops. They're like, how do you apply to college? So I was like, let's just throw a hip hop event. And what I found was these kids would sit with me and ask me all the questions. They would ask me about college, and they felt comfortable. And so I said, something's there. And it started to click for me. So that's when I really started researching it. But even though I was admitted, again, talking about hip hop, my faculty was like, I don't know if we're ready for that. They even questioned me on my clothes. So you were talking about that, Matthew. They said, you know, don't ask for a letter of recommendation if you come in a tracksuit to class in my doctoral program. But at this point in my life, I pushed back. So I said, if you're training us to be educational leaders and value our students, we should not judge people on how they dress, and we should see the value in them no matter what they look like. And I said, I want a job one day where I could wear my sweatpants to work and be respected and teach a subject that I love. So now I'm here. I made it happen. But again, you know, I had to get that doctorate and push. So sometimes you have to get in. I think we were on a panel last week talking about getting to the table, getting in the door, and then using your position to push. So that's kind of my educational journey with hip hop. But I started in the culture first before academia would actually allow me in.
Yo, that's, first of all, like, big ups to you for persisting. I'm like still picking my jaw up that like they admitted they did a bait and switch. Like, that's cool, but don't really do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's nuts. That's nuts. And just to be thinking about how institutions, K-12, higher ed, whether it's said or unspoken, there's this norm around how one should look, like being professional, and how hip hop is like, I mean, that's a whole other debate, like the industry of hip hop versus the culture of hip hop. But if we look at how the industry of hip hop has made the aesthetic like a norm, I just think it's weird that folks wouldn't want people to show up. Anyway. Y'all,
Yeah.
so many.
Yes.
Well, don't wear a tracksuit. So now, do you have like 5 million tracksuits? Like, just
I still wore them. I know my whole cohort came to class the next Saturday in suits, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have fun with this. So, you know, I went and got vintage shit. Yeah, and I pushed it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Keep pushing, both of y'all. Like, you know, Matthew, you said something about, like, if y'all see me looking down, I'm taking notes because I'm trying to catch these gems. Yes. And folks in the chat, feel free to, like, even now start catching gems, dropping gems and questions. So we're going to get into, like, maybe how you all see, particularly right now, hip hop in the space of, like, you know, whether you're meeting in person with your full class or hybrid or completely virtual, getting into right now, like how you all are not just managing that, but even maybe in the hip hop sense, flipping it. But you said something, Matthew, and I want to pick up on is this connection between anti-racist teaching and hip hop pedagogy. You know, being anti-racist is a real cool thing to do now. Finally, sarcasm is there, folks.
Soon to be banned.
It's a dig. Apparently it's trendy, and now folks are like, oh my gosh, that's an actual thing. I want to do that. But I wonder, because I think sometimes when folks hear like being anti-racist means like, you know, making sure you have more than Christopher Columbus in the books, or like, hey, these very performative things. Well, I'm really curious for you how you see this link and how you developed even this link of thinking about hip hop pedagogy. And as you're putting it, not just like bringing it in, but being it as an instantiation of anti-racist teaching. Like what, how, just unpack that for us if you can.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the two ideas go hand in hand, right? Because if you think about, as we talked about earlier, how hip hop was received in public education, there was this clash where it was like always ostensibly denied in schools, where like if you were a certain way, you didn't fit. If you looked a certain way but still got A's, you were somehow an anomaly. Oh, I should have paused and made that rhyme so I could have saved that bar for later. But whatever, I might come back to it. But you know what I mean? Like if you looked a certain way but then did well, all of a sudden, like it was like, oh, you did so well, Matthew. It's like, but now you're making me an outcast when you should be normalizing my identity. We should be complicating what masculinity and femininity, especially for people of color, what it looks like, not just pigeonholing everybody who looks a certain way. Meanwhile, while white people get to exist in whatever way they want, right? So for me, hip hop has just kind of been a natural extension of that in my classroom. And so when we talk about anti-racism teaching, or to me, to be specific, anti-Black racism teaching, it has to look at alternative and transformative modes of knowledge production, right? So take any class, right, from kindergarten to grade 12. Not only is it like, yeah, we need more than Christopher Columbus, or I'm in Canada, so we don't really learn about Christopher Columbus, but I can't even think of a Canadian historical figure that we do. But it's infusing, culturally relevant themes into the texts and the resources that we use currently, right? And for hip hop too, this is kind of like a side note, but like, it's 2020. You know what I mean? Like I said, the music I listen to and I think I'm kind of pretty up to date is nothing close to the music that the kids I teach are listening to, right? Like for me, I asked a couple of my students, I teach 7th grade, by the way. One kid mentioned this rapper named, his name's like Sleepy Hollow or something like that. And I thought he was joking. Like I literally was like, come on, bro. Like there's not a rapper named Sleepy Hollow. He's like, yeah, and he showed me, right? So for me, like that hip hop piece, infusing it with anti-racism education is also, there's a piece in the middle, and that's youth culture, right? When you teach, you need to connect those two things in order to validate their culture, right? It's about hip hop education. It's about anti-racism education. But to arrive at those two things, to validate those two things, you have to be connected with youth culture. That's where the equity work kind of sits, right? Connecting and validating the experiences of this generation that we teach right now, right? And not just trying to pour things into them and make them remember and then have them spit it back out at us in like 2 weeks.
Facts. Appreciate that. And it's very real. Like what you think is how I know that I don't know what's fresh and popping for real on the top. If they even still do top 10, like listen, I'm a old head. I don't know. I don't know how to use Spotify, whatever. I'm looking for a Spotify tutor out there in the world. But that connection you're pointing to, like youth culture, like I wonder do y'all think that there's something, or how would you, I know like I'm speaking to the preacher and the congregation and the choir and all the congregants, y'all in the same denomination of hip hop ed, but maybe for folks who are joining us who are maybe new to hearing the terminology or curious what it means beyond like, oh, I can compare Shakespeare and Drake. That was for you, Matthew. But I'm wondering if you all can point to some practices that maybe attracted you all to like what you first thought hip hop education meant. And then especially as it pertains to like elevating this youth culture. So where did y'all like meet hip hop education? Like what practices? Because we're talking about a buffet, right? And I just want to say, if you're doing the like comparative Shakespeare and Kendrick, cool, that's not the whole restaurant. Because I want to make sure folks don't be like, well, I had them listen to Soulja Boy and then we read The Scarlet Letter and it was good. So what practices pulled y'all in?
So I'll start with that because I'm still wrestling with how hip hop pedagogy is defined. So I should back up. When I first started going to conferences, and I'm going to study the culture I love, and I get to go to a conference and someone's presenting on it. And what I found a lot, and what I'm sure your students are looking at, is rap pedagogy, which is one of the first things that came about in the 1990s, which is the study of lyrics, the use of lyrics, the incorporation of lyrics. For me, because most of what I engage in is the breaking culture and graffiti culture, I was not seeing the hip hop that I engaged in the classroom or being discussed in academic text. So for me also, like you noticed, like and I think we've gone through this before, I have a really hard time standing still. So the idea of one of the things that I loved about the hip hop culture is when I went to a jam, you walk around, you have the ciphers, but there's so much more things going on. There's the storytelling, there's the teaching of how you do moves, there's these rules that you don't always, I think Bettina Love does a great job in her TED Talk talking about like, when do you know when to go in or not? And you actually model that. So I don't break, but I can work with a little kid and be like, hold on, this is how you can tell before, you know, you go into the cipher. There was, you know, multiple generations, there's music, there's art being done at the same time. So when I thought about how I could replicate that in my classroom, it did involve movement. It involved me not lecturing, which, well, I'm sure we'll talk about later about what that means for us in Zoom world. But the music, so in a certain point of my term, I would come in and I had students on my whiteboard doing graffiti and then another student at the computer already picking the music that the class wanted to listen to. And then they're like, you know how this relates? And so it got to a point where my students became teachers, and they were able to pick up on a culture, and I shared it with them originally, they got more interested in. And even my student the other day said, after, you know, a few weeks in your class, I thought I had hip hop in my classroom, but we never did. So I think it's important to talk about the foundation of the culture, the history of the culture, how it was multi-ethnic, the various contributions, socio-political context. But again, this is all stuff you say, you know, in academia, but it's like, shit was horrible in the Bronx. But Emil Jensen from South Africa, he said it the most. He's like, these kids didn't have nothing, they had their heritage. So it's going back to all these different parts that make up hip hop and people that engage in it and what makes them hip hop, that is not often talked about in the classroom and is all incredibly relevant and important. So I'm trying in my work to push it so that we're talking about the different elements. We're talking about what goes on outside of the jam, what goes on between jams, and what goes on even before you even start talking about making a song. There's a lot of emphasis right now on rap lyrics and music production, and justifiably so. That's how most people are introduced into the culture and engage in the culture across the world. But there's so much more about we got to remember it's an entire culture with multiple elements, and we have to pay our respects to that, and make sure we bring it into the classroom and authentically. So I guess that's that answer.
Yeah, those are some gems there. And you know, if I could add from my 2 cents, like I'm trying to get my kids or the kids that I teach to y'all. Like my end goal is to get these kids to college, to university, to believe in themselves, right? So since we're on it, like for me, it sounds deep, but it's really not that deep, yo. Like these kids have to they have to trust that they're intelligent beings, right? Like, so for me, look at it like this. If you named your top 5 right now, and you named your top 5 right now, and I named my top 5 right now, best rappers of all time, we all have a different top 5, right? When we can all agree that the top 5 are genius, they're brilliant, they drop dope bars, they got crazy flow, right? And then, so let me take it outside of hip hop for a second. Someone like Jackson Pollock, like who makes that art, right? That sells for millions of dollars. Like I look at that and I'm like, what the hell is this shit? This is nothing. Like this, anybody could do this, right? So what I'm trying to get at is the art of teaching through a hip hop lens is for teachers to be able to validate student brilliance, right? So again, some people might find that entryway through like, oh yeah, this Drake song and this Shakespeare sonnet, like let's compare the two to try and draw kids in. But yo, a school, like a boring lesson is like kids might not like Drake, you know what I mean? Like these kids don't even listen to Drake anymore, dog. Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like there's one thing to stay relevant and make it more engaging, but it's another thing to be like, yo, being smart is dope as hell, yo. You can look how you want to look and still be a nerd. Like, we need to repackage what nerdiness means. Nerdiness is a wave, you know what I mean? So for me, my philosophy, not even pedagogy, is to take the culture of hip hop and include brilliance with it, because inside of school, that part is left out unless those people who are really doing the work are doing the work. So for me, the way I look at it is validating the kid who comes. Yeah, he might come a little late. Oh well, like over time, if you validate his brilliance, right, or her brilliance or their brilliance, they're going to engage in the work. They're going to get to like we all mentioned earlier, like it took a minute for the glow up to occur. Like if you told me when I was 13 years old that I'd end up being a public school teacher, I would ask you, what drugs are you smoking, right? But like it takes time to evolve as a person. So the goal is to allow children, allow youth that opportunities, you know what I mean? Like to get good grades, to validate them. So that's where I situate hip hop. That's where I think hip hop education falls in public schooling. It's validating. And beyond that, to get to a more like practical level, I'm really like my thing is writing is like the gateway to all opportunities. If you're able to write and communicate orally, like and you know, you will have a lot of options in the world. But like a 16 bar verse, a well-structured essay, and an oral presentation to me are all genius, are all brilliant. So it's about options. You might have that kid who would rather like do an oral or do an oral presentation instead of write down an essay or explain the meaning of something through some bars or something different, right? So that's just the other tangible, practical teaching side of it. Like the vehicle, the medium can look different. And a lot of teachers are so fixed on the vehicle to brilliance looking one way, and it should be able to look different.
And can I add on that? And he brought up a great point, and I think that's where a lot of our education is going, is seeing the value in students. So when I first started writing my dissertation, they ask you to create a theoretical framework or conceptual framework. And for a long time, I had no idea what that was. But I found a model done by Terry Yasso at UC Riverside. It's a community cultural wealth model. And it was one of the things that really helped me explain the magic and power of hip hop. And so I get to meet with her soon. You have no idea. I get so excited. So I said, when I come into hip hop, when someone comes into hip hop, they're not like, oh, we'll see if you become something. They're like, you're going to be the best, and we're going to help you get there. And you're going to be like no one else before you. And you're going to show up, so that idea that we are already seeing in what you said, Matthew, is the value in your students and their potential. But it's our responsibility, the OGs, the pioneers, the mentors, the teachers, to lift them up and get them to where they want to go, and allowing them to be their authentic selves and get them there in a way that looks for them is their superstar, So I really like that you brought that up. And I think that's something that is shared by a lot of different people in this field that are using hip hop in education, is that before anything else, before instruction, curriculum, learning outcomes, Common Core, we see value in students, and we recognize that not all of them are the same. So if I have a punk rock kid come in, I'm excited. Let's do this. Let's talk about Clash. It's really seeing the magic within them, and how do you create that and make it grow. So I just got excited when you brought that up. So I think that's something that is at the core of all of us that are using hip hop in education, right? The right way.
That part.
So yeah, I'll call you out. It's hip hop though, I was like, we'll call you out, but we'll be like, how did you come to those conclusions? Not in the culture though. It's very different. Be like, what? That shit's whack. Where are you coming from? But in academia, we're like, can you cite your sources?
Well, see, that's the thing, like all the time. I think like I love this validating student brilliance, and also thinking about the genius that is inherent in hip hop culture, right? It's like, not even, we're just talking about the cultural production side of it. Yeah, like the coming up with the craft, but it's the mindset to be like, we got this. I don't care what it looks like around us. There's nobody better. Mm-hmm. Folks, will spend a lot of money to try to figure out how to get in touch with their voice that tells them you aight. We're like young people, and that's not to, you know, to minimize it. Like we go through things and we need support systems. I'm all about having you a support system because life and adulting is always a draft that I'm sorry that I was conscripted into. But like if we think about if somebody has that sense of self and like somebody is writing, Jason, I am somebody, like folks might be confused around like, what is youth culture? How do I validate who they are? Like, yo, a lot of our young people have that sense of self or self possibility already, but schooling, traditional forms of schooling have beat it out of them, have made them like distance themselves from themselves. And so like the whole thing of, you know, hip hop and reminding ourselves, thank you, Tasha, for this, that we're not just talking about rap. I feel like that's something that people get stuck on. Like the rap is one product, and it was the picked product because it's the one that was easiest to commercialize and monetize. Well, hip hop is an entire culture, and there's many different artistic manifestations of that. So if we remember that the whole culture has in it inherently a pedagogy. It's like a word I didn't use until academia. I was like, what are people saying?
I have to Google it and make sure I pronounce
I was like, am I pronouncing it? Is this not a bad word? It sounds naughty.
Methods.
But like hip hop it has its own schooling ethos and ideology. And so I love hearing how you all are also making plain that when we're also saying youth culture, I think sometimes people are like confused about what that means. Is that the aesthetics that youth are rocking with? And that's part of it, but I think it's also tapping into, and that Tara Yoso article about the community cultural wealth and like the different capital, the assets that our young people have, like not trying to posit that in them, it's there. How do we leverage our privilege as the adults in the space to actually get out of the way and support them finding and believing and connecting with themselves? So, I mean, y'all are like touching on so much around like what it means to validate that student brilliance. Like I wrote that down. I'm gonna cite you, Mr. Matthew R. Morris. I'm always cite because I don't want the plagiarism police to come get me. I don't want nobody to call me out on the social webs.
Nah, we good. We can all sample each other. You know, that's how hip hop works. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But we also know you better know who you sampling.
Right, you better.
I made that beat.
Ooh.
Oh, did you? Because if you were out in the 60s, that was on that song, right? But that's what I'm saying. Hip hop has this like the academy schooling from K to whatever doctoral. It's not the only system and way of knowing and being. Like we sample, we dig, we remix, we collab. And that's called all of these fancy things. So I think sometimes our young people think that they are supposed to know and learn in this foreign, unreachable way. And it's right there. I tell young people all the time, y'all know how to research. Y'all 2 seconds into your phone and you got like a whole tree on who is JID. And I'm like, wait, what? Huh? What label? What they name really? They was born where? They give the beat for who? They was on who album? That's research. And so validating their brilliance. So with all of those beautiful nuggets, how y'all doing it now, right now in these virtual hybrid? I know, Matthew, are you hybrid? You kind of,
I'm face with the mask on.
Face to face. Again, continue to lift him up, but see, like Canada got like some better leadership. So
well, it's a struggle though. Like that's the thing. Like I think, you know, with everything going on in 2020, it's definitely not like it's not easy. It's not easy right now, you know. And I think for me, because we went out in March, so it was like a half a year since kids have been back, and I talked to a lot of my former students on like Instagram or whatever, and a lot of them have told me that like they just lost the motivation of what happened, right? So because of what happened. So for me, I know you didn't get to fully like finish your question, you know, but I kind of like jumped into the cipher. But I think what you were going to ask was how are we maintaining or keeping, you know, hip hop alive or hip hop education alive as we go virtual and go through this
you caught the
pandemic
vibe.
education.
You
Um,
got the vibe. Go.
um, I think for me, when I think about it, is just getting back to like what I just mentioned, just the basic stuff at first, right? Just making students feel comfortable in whatever space they are and wherever they are on the pendulum of motivation and learning. I can't speak to virtual right now because I have no clue what that looks like this fall. I'm in the space where I got to wear a mask every day, and I'm in my building, and we got to socially distance, and there's no rotary, and I teach one class, all the subjects, and we go outside for mass breaks, and it's back to like sitting in rows like back when we first started school. So for me, it's been a lot on me as an educator just to get used to this entirely new thing we're calling schooling and teaching and education. But keeping that in mind, my thing is just starting small, just starting with the little things and validating some of the different kids in my class. And it is very small. Sometimes it's just like noticing a pair of shoes, like, a pair of J's that Danika's wearing, and asking her about, like, just joking with her, like, yo, what size are those shoes? Like, you think I can hold those for a couple weeks or whatever? Just making them feel comfortable in the space right now, because we're in such a like foreign and brand new, like we're all going through this experience together and it's all new to us. So it's getting back to those fundamentals of trying to create a community.
I love that. Okay, so I'm not comfortable with technology, and it never seems to work well for me. It's just something I've had to grow. Like I could touch a computer and it kind of fizzles out. So even my dissertation, I brought printed handouts on my dad bringing his other computer. So technology scares me. Every time I go to a conference and never have the right plug, I mean, that's just the reality of it. But what really hit home the other day, me and my students, I chose to do synchronous with my hip hop course. And we were watching a video about graffiti artists, the early graffiti artists in New York, Taki 183 and Lee. And so they were talking to them, and they were talking about their experiences. And they said, well, we'd have to go wander around New York. We'd have to get an idea of the city and then figure out how to navigate across all these barriers, and I say barriers, I mean like locked gates and fences and up walls and dangerous moving trains. But the concept of that, it really opened up discussion for my students, because then I thought, that is hip hop. We have to figure out how to operate in our setting with limited resources and be able to adapt real quick. You come to a floor and you're a b-boy and that thing's dirty and there's pebbles on there. Maybe you're not really going to be doing a lot of backspins. Maybe I'll do a little bit of footwork, not go all the way on the floor. So these ideas that people in hip hop were able to come into a setting, into a situation where every sign is telling them that it's locked, it's closed, it's dangerous, you can't get in there. And they were thinking, okay, I can get above and then I can still express myself and do what I want to do and have my name up there and it's going to be seen. So we didn't wait for those spaces to be made for us. We went and figured out how to overcome those barriers to make that space and put our name up there. So I think that's when I talk to my students, I told all the time, they're like, wow, you're really vulnerable. I'm like, no, I'm authentic. I'm honest with my students. I said, when I first came to UCR, they gave me a classroom where you couldn't move the seats because they were bolted into the floor. So we went out in the hallway. We went outside. The next time they put me in a theater, so I was like, okay, we're going to project onto the white screen and we're going to climb over chairs if we have to. And then I said, now, I'm being forced to be online. So what does that mean? How do I continue to push it and still create that feeling that I get when I'm at a cipher with my friends in this online experience? And that it forces me to get certified to teach online in multiple different modalities to figure out how I can make that work in the way I see it. So part of it is knowing your environment and pushing it and not letting, I get that all the time. Well, I couldn't get help and I didn't have the resources, and you got to keep pushing, and not let a simple barrier keep you from putting your name up there where the public can see. So I think that was a really cool experience with my students to be able to talk about that. And again, we're talking about graffiti art, and then it came into how does that translate into being an educator or a leader. And so that's when I get excited about hip hop, because all these lessons are there. So that's kind of, I guess, a short, long answer to that question, but that's
Right.
it.
Well, to your point, like, again, like tapping back into like what informs some of the genius, just the reality of hip hop is being able to, I would even say, lean into its Africanist roots of being improvisational, of hearing the drum and responding. And you can make a metaphor of what the drum is, but understanding like, okay, we're not meeting in person, okay? And at the same time, Matthew, I love how you lifted this up. They're like, this is hard and it's taxing. Because like, hip hop space, whether it's a classroom, a concert, or a cipher, it's about like literally leaning in and being together. And so I just want to lift up to all educators who are trying to make a lot of something out of a lot of craziness right now. Like, keep pushing, because it's not easy. And then keep it real with your students. I had to have a day in class and I was like, yo, how are we doing? Because I'm gonna be honest, right now, y'all, I'm not. And realizing, and I love this, some of the stuff that's come up in the chat, that like, we gotta liberate ourselves from what should happen in a classroom and stay available to the moment. Like, what's the thing that we need to do here? We need to have a check-in. That's right. The lesson plan of the day. So like, keep it real with that. So at this point, we want to open it up to folks who have any questions. There's a lot of comments and testifying going on in the chat. But if anybody has questions for Tasha or Matthew, we'd love to take those from you. We can invite you to turn on your camera and your mic if you'd like to pose them yourself. No wrong questions here. So we can learn a little bit more around where you're at, how you can be a resource, or how you can tap into the resource of these humans who are with us. So while we see if there's any questions, I'm wondering, Matthew, you said something. Or was it Tasha? I don't know. One of you dope folks. Well, who are your top 5?
Well, I'm gonna skate that one right now. We can get into that in a second, because I did want to add something. I did want to add something that both of you mentioned, right? Like you said, Aisha, like checking in with your students, and Tasha, you said you dropped a gem. You dropped a bar. You said, "I'm not vulnerable. I'm authentic." Like, yeah. That's a bar right there. And I think that all gets back to hip hop, right? Like, hip hop has a built-in bullshit detector, right? Like, everyone knows from like Vanilla Ice and Millie, I think was Millie Vanilli, right? Millie Vanilli. Listen, I'm born in '85. I wasn't even outside for that.
You're traumatizing, okay?
But and then all the way up to this point with dude from New York City, at some point the bullshit comes to the surface, right? And that is kind of like where I feel educators we need to be right now, because there is so much happening that we got to keep it a buck with whoever it is in our learning community, because of all the things that have occurred in 2020.
And I think it's part of it's like academia has ingrained in you that you should fit an image and that you should never admit to weakness or that something's not right. And that's not how you educate. You educate by sometimes coming home and be like, wow, I messed that up. And I come back in the next class and say, let's talk about this. I had these thoughts, and usually my students never picked up on it, but it's something that will help them if they become educators and leaders, is that we're humans. Right. And it's never going to be perfect, and it's difficult. And it also gives your students that freedom and to admit that things aren't right. So right. It's not normal times. And I tell students, my love for you is first before teaching you content, because that's what's going to make you an educational leader. Is that you love the people you serve.
Yeah, and hip hop in itself, all forms of it it's a self-reflective process, right? Like whether it's graffiti or making music or dancing, like it's an inner reflection that is projected out. That's what learning should be. That's what teaching should be, right? So that gets back to like how hip hop and education all intertwine. And by the way, I think we successfully dodged a top 5 question.
Not Big Al's. That should be in the top 5.
Saying I'm here.
Got Nas in there. I got Nas in there after that last album for sure.
The baby. My son said the baby, which I'm still learning about.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Like,
he sat in the car with me. He's like, "Have you heard this song, Mom?" But the extended version,
the live version.
The live version. See, he knows. So he's like, "You have to see this, Mom. Look what they're talking about." And we were able to have a conversation about what's going on through the lens of the baby.
The baby. He's right there, though. Like, I love it. He might as well come on and be the other panelist. But see, even that right there, like posing the question, like I was writing in a note somewhere, like clearly I love learning from people, right? It's like even posing that question is such a platform. If people pose it with the idea that I want to be available to see where this goes. I like to say hip hop is a multi-car train, right? And there are more cars that come onto it. And there's no rule that says you can't get up and go to the other cars and see who else is on the train. You should know that the train does have an engineer. It does have a first car. There are some OGs who was like, let's put this thing on the track. And like, I have to check that where I got in on this train ain't where my students got in on. But it doesn't mean that we can't actually have a conversation and see where it goes. Like your young one was like, but wait, have you listened? Isn't that what we want our students to do, to like have an opinion, to have a critical conversation, to invite deep listening and exchange? Boom, that's a whole degree he got right now. You know? So
well, it's information literacy, it's critical thinking. It's what we're asking them to do. And for a 7th grader, and Matthew, I'm sure I would love to see your students, just to see this generation and how they're able to view the world and how they see themselves as active participants is just phenomenal. It's no longer passive learning if we supplement it, right? But because I can't rely on his teacher said that they had grit because he's probably gonna laugh. That they had grit because they rode their bike for 20 miles in a suburban area. And my son's like, can you believe that he said he had grit because he was riding his bike in an area where he could get fresh water and doesn't have to worry about safety. And so, they're able to start picking up on these terms and these concepts and go, no, even if I have a nice life like that. So I'm fascinated.
Maybe that's why he said it. So we think about it. Wait, that's not right. That's not what grit is. That'd be the smart option.
Yeah, he goes on. That's a good part of the line. He gets to sit and listen to me, but I'm still not cool though.
That's a young you right there. Yeah, you might be right. Maybe you try to pull the old like, so what's in this book? Why are we learning about what we're learning line? Hey.
Yeah,
young fella might have a point.
And to challenge things and be confident in that. I wasn't, and that's what I wish I could have been more confident in my convictions as a young person. So, I have major respect for people in the K through 12 system doing that work. So by the time they get to me, they're like, I love me. Now let's see how far I can go, and having that base. So
I love that connection. Again, like Matthew, you said, you're trying to get your young people to like, get into college, university, and with owning the brilliance, not feeling damaged and scarred by just surviving K-12. It's like, I got to be me, right?
Yeah, and just to add to that too, right? Like it's not only, and for us, we all live in that space of education, academia. It's not only to get them to, you know, go to college, it's if they want to, or if they think that that's where they want to get to. It's, you know, it's to get them to realize that they need to do what they love to do eventually. And in order to get to that point, they have to love who they are, and they have to be in love with who they are. Right. Like this one dude in my class, 7th grade kid, he wants to be an excavator. And I'm assuming because his dad probably does construction, right? Like the excavator is like the big, I don't know, it like digs dirt, right? And so my thing is like, okay, you can be an excavator. They make dope money. You know what I mean? Why don't you own the excavation company though, my G? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why don't you own the whole company? Right. So it's not about like go to college, go to university, then do this, then do that. You can do what you want. You know, there's plenty of other jobs other than the doctor and the lawyer that you always get told. But let's like take what you think you can do by your environment, your area, and let's just like elevate it up a little bit, just so we have a little bit of a safety net here. And that's the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Each one teach one.
Boom. Boom. There it is. There it is. I love that. Yeah. Also, thank you. Like the university, the academy is not, well, that's a whole other conversation.
Hey, that again, but we can make it a difference in it.
Just like somebody dropped, like, we got to make our own institutions. Right. You know, and I think wherever we are, like if we can find that area to push, right. And it's not, again, because we're needing hip hop to have the academy stamp. It's because we're recognizing and not displacing our genius and our identity as it's informed by hip hop and other factors. Like we don't have to submit that to be massacred by institutions, right? There's like a slow cultural genocide that happens inside of schooling, but I've said too much. And so like wherever we are and wherever we're called to advocate for our young people, our adult people, for ourselves to see and be our whole selves, and the love factor that both of you all have mentioned throughout, I think is so pivotal, right? Well, you know, church is in both Tasha and I's name, so y'all welcome for this Tuesday evening gathering, congregation. And as we move to the end of today's sermon and experience, we here at HipHopEX have a little bit of a tradition, right? We understand that, you know, this is one of the things that started for us in the spring with our annual conference, which is traditionally in person in April or May. We always have space for the cipher to jump off, pop off, and for people to contribute visual work, movement, lyrics. And so we're still trying to keep that vibe going. And so as we conclude any session, and even in our classrooms, we just open it up for folks to drop a line. It could rhyme or it could not. It could be in its own time. It could be hot. You welcome. You welcome.
Hey.
MC such and such. Now my ratchet personality, her name is Ace Do It, Go Through It. But I don't know if she's really here with us in full flesh today. I didn't check in. But at any rate, whether you have, we'll open it up to our panelists, and if there's anybody who's joining us who also feels like they want to contribute a line to close, your line can be movement. We definitely welcome a good bankhead or a two-step or a Millie Rock or whatever, or a line. So we want, and it can rhyme or not. I'm going to try to put an instrumental on. We'll see if that works. If not, we'll go a cappella. No music. No music. But Tasha and Matthew, I want to invite you all to give a line or two of appreciation, to synthesize and respect on the cipher as we close, for nuggets that are crystallized or for gratitude, whatever. But we want to open it up for you all to like give us a line or two or dance. Matthew, you looking like you ready, like you've been cooking up.
I just want to know what I'm just curious of what beat you picked.
I don't.
You need to. I'm not gonna run.
Pressure. I'll take a request. How about that? Like I'm not.
Nah. Come on now. No. I don't.
It's not gonna be a Drake beat.
Nah, that's fine. I'm just curious what you're gonna play.
Now I'm nervous. I'm feeling some type of way. I just kind of don't.
Why?
No judgment, okay?
Are you gonna do it?
I'm gonna play a track.
Okay.
Set it off. Am I on beat? Can you hear me? This is definitely a first in a meeting. Okay, I guess I'll set it off. Represent the 6 side. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Yeah, appreciate the gems. Amen. Oh, inshallah. Or whoever is your God. Talking about school. Should be talking about laws because they used to discriminate on my slog. I'm an OG. It's hard to freestyle about teaching. In my whole life of freestyling, it has never been about school. I'm just gonna say that.
Freestyle what's on your heart.
No.
You could be Matthew Morris today.
You don't have the bleep. You don't have the bleep button. I'm trying to respect the space.
Wait, you're like, I'm gonna give you Matthew Morris, not Mr. Morris.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you all the tattoos.
You're gonna get the Saturday version.
Right. He has this
Here for the Saturday version. All right, let's see what you got, Dr. Iglesias.
Oh my God.
We're gonna have to go, wait a minute.
I will bring the music down, but I'm not an MC. But I think that's something I wanted to bring up actually at the end of it. Everyone's always like, what element do you engage in? I'm like, knowledge. I have 2 left feet. I'm bad with technology and I can't rhyme. But that's okay. I think everybody should be welcomed into the culture. You don't need a membership card. If you love it, you're about it, you promote it and support it, you're hip hop.
Beautiful. And that's it. And thank you for elevating knowledge. For anybody that didn't catch that.
Hold on. You're not gonna drop any bars?
Who, me? No?
Yeah, please.
I'm sweating.
No. Aisha.
Oh,
Aisha.
Aisha?
Okay. I was like, not me. I'm sweating.
What are you doing?
Okay.
I gave you my
You did. My bad. You did.
And this is why we bring the pioneers into the classroom. We're like, oh, they're right. You know?
Like I said, in my other life, I feel like I'm supposed to like be able to freestyle. And I love playing like games with friends. Because for me, I think it's such a high skill. Like I have so much respect. Oh, we got bars, little one? We here for the youth them.
Did you do it? Able to do it?
Let me think.
Just do it. Ready? Okay, put a beat on. Let's see if he can do it.
Let me try.
He's gonna try.
Okay, let's go. Gotta come closer.
He's like, so he used his time to clown on me.
I love it. Listen, I feel the vibe. We're not gonna let Zoom make us think we're not great. We have to come up with our own thing. You know, sometimes Zoom have us all looking like we the Teddy Riley, right? In the battle. But y'all are magnificent. I am so appreciative of you all devoting part of your Tuesdays. I know y'all are in the classrooms. You got little ones. We appreciate you dropping some knowledge for us to further illuminate, right? Like, what do we even mean when we say hip hop education? What do we mean when we say hip hop pedagogy? And for you all showing up for it and not being an academic exercise. Y'all are the truth. Y'all are practitioners. Y'all dope as hell. Y'all got all respect and love from me. Folks in the chat was like, this is super dope. And so that's what it is right now. We reinvent, we keep it moving, but we stay real. We have check-ins. We are going to be committed. I'm just riding back some of the nuggets I'm taking that we are going to unlearn and grow. We're going to stay present. We're going to make sure that we can repackage what nerdiness means. Somebody in the yellow shirt has said that. I am not vulnerable, I'm authentic. For us also just to find those moments where we can reclaim what has been normed as what is intellectual, what is right, what is grit, and realize that the genius has always been alive in us, it's alive in our students, and that we're here to make space for it, not to tell them what it is, but to make space for it. So I just want to thank you all for giving time. Do y'all have anything that you want to promo? Because you know, hip hop exclusive, drop it. It's in the link. Yo, follow me at hashtag.
Yeah, all day. So I'm a co-founder of my nonprofit. It's the Hip Hop Association of Advancement and Education. We have a whole bunch of initiatives getting ready to work on working with amputee youth or youth amputees, working on bringing hip hop camps to youth with disabilities. I think they're often let out. So that's a big initiative. Also our conference, the Global Conference on Hip Hop Education. It'll be co-hosted by ASA College out in New York. This year will be virtual. Next year will be online or in person. In February of 2021. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and just so your students know, people know, I always make time to meet with people around the world that are using hip hop in their communities. I think that if we're going to learn, we need to learn and listen. And so I learn and am able to do things and connect people because I make that time. So anytime anyone wants to reach out, would like support or to connect with other people, please. But yeah, so that's our stuff. And of course we have a million more, but I'm very grateful to be here with you all and thank you for the invitation.
And Matthew, you got anything cooking?
I'm always trying to stay in the kitchen. So just, stay tuned. Follow me on, Twitter at Call Me Mr. Morris. My IG is Matthew R. Morris. And if you haven't checked out the TEDx talk, it's called the Fresh Prince Syndrome. I'll drop it all in the chat too, so you don't have to phonetically trying to figure all the handles out. But I appreciate this. This was fun. This was super dope.
I love it. And wait, don't you host a little something?
I do. I host a bi-weekly chat for educators. It's called Quarantine Ed. You can find information on it on Twitter. It's happening this Thursday. It's at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's just a chat for anybody involved in education to come and break bread for an hour. We talk about all things pertaining to what's going on in education right now. And of course, we always want to dig deep with how is the work actually actualizing itself and being transformative inside these classroom walls. So yeah, that's what it is right now.
Yeah, I was like, you better not promote that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I definitely told my students to follow you on Twitter or to at least read your Twitter thread, because there's always something, a little nugget, a little something. There's a little bit of Saturday Matthew in there sometimes.
That's all Saturday Matthew.
That's all Saturday Matthew. And Tasha, with the conference, I appreciate anybody who mounts a conference and the work that it takes, but that it's done out of spirit of uniting us. There's a good cohort of us out here who are in these streets trying to progress the state of education wherever we are around the globe. So make sure y'all check her out. I definitely reached out to both of these folks through direct messaging on social networks. I don't say DM because it makes me feel weird because I'm kind of old.
Yeah, I think I
don't want to slide. I just want to send people a message directly and then connect.
Through direct messenger.
So reach out to these folks. They lit, they live, they the truth. Again, thank y'all so much. We will continue programming tomorrow. We are talking about what school of hip hop are we in? Are we in a post hip hop world? Like, what do we call this? And what is an old school throwback to you? We're going to have a little party on Thursday. So please follow us on social media so we can get y'all a take on what counts as a hip hop throwback. And then Friday, we'll wrap up the conversations. series, we're thinking about how does hip hop translate from streets to the stage for all of our hip hop performers. How do y'all weigh in on when the culture hits the main stage theater? What happens? How do we keep it real? So again, thank y'all. We keep it lit, we keep it live. We will have monthly programming every month. Next month, our theme is hip hop history. Since it's Hip Hop History Month, we want to be intentional about shouting out the voices of women in the culture so that we not silence them, but elevate them as well. So stay on the lookout. Again, much love to Matthew and Tasha. Y'all the truth. Love y'all like cook food. Good night, everybody.